Hi everybody, I'm John Brewer. So, in an effort to avoid incredible whiplash as I adjust this channel's content, I'm going to start with building spaceships. What really drew me into the BattleTech universe was not actually the mechs, but the spaceships. I was and am a huge Star Trek fan, and the design and depth of the warships in BattleTech really fascinated me. As I was getting into this, MechWarrior 2 Ghost Bear's Legacies expansion pack came out, and it involved mechs fighting on the hulls of spaceships, which was the coolest thing ever for me. There are rules for playing missions on flat maps on the board game where you're fighting on warships, but the curvature of the spindly starships in BattleTech kind of demanded a better representation. So when BattleTech got its most recent miniatures rule set, a hexless system where units could walk around on the game terrain, I got the idea in my head that if somebody built a warship that was to scale, you could play a boarding action on it like it was terrain. Alpha Strike came out in 2013 and fixed the miniature scale at 1 to 285 and the terrain scale to 7.5 meters per inch, which is about 1 to 295. So my first impulse was to go big. I wanted to build a McKenna set piece for conventions, just a huge thing. And then I did the math. And the Mighty McKenna is 1,405 meters long. That comes out to 187 inches, or 15 and a half feet. That's 6 inches longer than my car. My other problem was I had no real modeling ability. I could glue kits together, but this would be a scratch build, and a huge one at that. Then I got an idea. I could use one of these newfangled 3D printers that had been coming down in price and complexity to do it. Then I just needed to find somebody who had a model of a sufficiently small ship that I could print. So in the summer of 2023, I got a resin printer and started playing with it. It was messy, it was hard to calibrate, it was expensive to run, and it did not like printing large things. And I kind of gave up on the idea. But come around to Christmas 2023, I found out I was going to have a chance to go to a convention with a bunch of BattleTech creators and fans in March of 2024. That was it. I was going to print a ship, and I was going to bring it to that event so that I could go play Alpha Strike on a warship. It was going to be awesome. So Christmas Day, I ordered a shiny new filament printer. I got on the 28th of December, I printed 2 models, and I had broken it by the 30th. I got a new print head, I started looking around for the ship that I was going to print, and I ran across an online user named Yakudami, who actually makes these beautiful models of real-life naval ships and aircraft, but it turned out was also a BattleTech fan and had made a few models of BattleTech ships. He had 3 BattleTech warships he had modeled. The Essex-1 destroyer, the Mark 42 Vincent-class corvette, and a Cameron-class battlecruiser. Now, the Essex-1 destroyer is about 600 meters long, so that would give me about a 2-meter model. The Mark 42 Vincent was 402 meters long, giving me like a 4.5-foot model. The problem with the Mark 42 Vincent is that it is basically a box. It would be something close to a meter wide or a half a meter tall, and it would have a just stupid internal volume. So no go there. Then there was finally the Cameron-class battlecruiser, which was going to be almost 3 meters long, and now we're back into smart car territory. So I actually printed one segment of the Essex-1 just to get a sense of how big it would be. Yeah, there it is. So this is how big that segment would be. That's like that section right there. This thing would be huge. The 2-meter model wasn't happening. Then I remembered an interesting fact. The Essex-1 actually only has one place where it has art in the source books, and that place is actually a reuse of the old Vincent-class Mark 39, the predecessor to the Mark 32. So the Essex-1 model actually could be used as the Vincent Mark 39 model, and that gets me a 4.5-foot model that isn't the size of a desk. There we go. Now, testing with my printer, I figured out that the biggest thing that I could print was about a 10-centimeter cube. If I got bigger than that, then I started having warping issues because I couldn't get my build plate perfectly flat. It's a whole thing. So I cut out various protrusions like the wings and the fins, and then I diced the rest of the model. So I started printing all of these pieces, but I had a few issues. If I assembled it as a rigid structure, it wouldn't fit in a Pelican 1740, which was the largest shipping container I had to hand, and I would have had to build a custom crate for it. It probably would be stupidly expensive to ship. I'm terrible at woodworking. It would be a whole thing. So basically I had to build it so it could break down and easily reassemble at the convention with minimal tools. After messing around with the dimension of the case and the models, I figured out I had to cut it into thirds. How I was going to structure it was another problem. It needed to stand on its own and be very stable, but unless I stood on the engine bell, that didn't seem practical. So I thought about building around a piece of PVC pipe or a long dowel that would run up the middle, but then I realized that anything long or wide enough wouldn't fit in the case with the rest of the model. So after some searching around, I found a possible solution: extruded aluminum. Now, if you haven't worked with extruded aluminum before, it's basically an erector set for adults. It's strong segments of aluminum bar with rails on all four sides so that you can attach things with simple bolts and special nuts. It's amazing. And I bought enough aluminum and conics to make the 3 boxes and 4 legs that formed kind of the core structure of my model. The whole lattice could be broken down and reassembled on site with just a pair of Allen wrenches. So for 2 months, I kept printing pieces, and slowly the scaffolding started coming together. Okay, so I'm flying out on March 15th. The Pelican case is too big to check on my flight. I have to ship it. That means I need to get it done and drop this thing with UPS by 9 March or so in order to get out the door on time. I keep having problems with the print. The lattice space is too small, the leg holes aren't in exactly the right spot. In the end, I nearly printed 2 complete ships just from all the non-fitting spare parts I had. The 3rd of March, I finally have all the parts assembled. Problem is, you can't put a miniature on them. They'll fall off almost anywhere, so I need to magnetize the model. So I get a lot of magnetic primer. I slather the stuff on. It recommends 3 coats. I put on 5, just to completely cover that model in thick black ferrous primer. I slap down a layer of bare house paint for the base hull, and I finish the base coat on the night of March 8th. But there is so much detail work to do. The next day, my friend Andrew comes over, and like a champ, he helps me on the detail work, the danger stripes, the radiators, the numbers, the accent colors, the sword of Blake on the prow. And we put it all together, snap a few photos, and out it goes to UPS. The only thing we didn't have time to finish were the bay doors, and I had like 5 days to work on those before I flew out with them in my luggage. So I get to the event hotel. I pick up the case, and with the utmost apprehension, I open it up. The whole thing is in there. The dorsal radiator assembly cracked a bit in transit, but that was it. I pull it out, I assemble it in my hotel room, it goes together great, I take it down to the event space, and everybody is very impressed. Tragically, though, the magnets are just not up to the task. I brought some blue sticky as a replacement, but after all that, we never ended up playing a game on it. The model stood on display for a few days, and then I packed it up and shipped it home. And other than a quick check to make sure it was actually in the case, it sat in my basement for the last year when I brought it out for this video. Unfortunately, there was considerable damage to the model when I took it out. The paint was pretty banged up, the dorsal midsection had broken along the center line adhesive, and the port side of that section had actually snapped in half. The port side wing had a peg snap off, the dorsal midsection had lost a few magnets holding the ventral midsection on. We had some work to do. First, the snapped dorsal midsection. Centerline break was along where 2 pieces were glued together, but the port section actually broke in the middle of a piece. You can see how the internal structure is both really thin on the skin and on the internal structure. They fit together cleanly, so I could try gluing it, but there's not a lot of area for the connection, so that won't work. I could put a doubler plate on it to do both sides, but I don't have a lot of clearance between this and the aluminum substructure. But then it occurred to me that I have a very thin and flexible doubling plate that has its own adhesive. Duct tape! So I put the 2 pieces down. It works great. I probably need to clean up that brake line if it ever goes back on display, but honestly, I need to redo all the paint if I ever do that again. So let me know if you want to see that. Next, I need to glue the 2 halves of the structure back together. For that, I've learned the best thing for gluing PLA to PLA is IPS Weld-On 16 acrylic paint cement. It's fantastic. Just make sure to use it in a well-ventilated area. So with those 2 pieces put back together, I need to replace the dorsal magnets. These hold in the 2 vertical members that magnetically collect up, and the ventral hull section to hold it up. I just drop 2 magnets into the slots and apply some Gorilla Glue. It turns out, though, that this is my big mistake during the repairs to this model. I installed both dorsal magnets with reverse polarity, meaning the connector members would only stick to one part but repel the other. I couldn't easily get any of the magnets out once they were Gorilla Glued in, so I just printed 2 new magnets through a quick filament change, which is why one of them is half black, half white. This time, I carefully placed the magnets on the parts they're going to connect to, use a Sharpie to label them, put A and F for fore and aft, and I Gorilla Glued those down, and presto, the ship is structurally repaired. Now, this ship was a rush job. Every problem I came across, I solved in the most expedient way I could. I was also learning a lot about large-scale printing and multiple component FDM objects on the fly, so there were a bunch of mistakes that I made building this ship. Let's review those real quick. First, the magnetization strategy was barely acceptable. I used this magnetic primer, it worked okay, but it had a hard time holding on magnetized minis. In practice, I ended up using blue sticky to hold on the minis when I had to. Second, the magnetic connections in the midsection are clever, but don't work very well. I usually have to stack a bunch of magnets to get them to actually have enough grip. In retrospect, I probably should have put rectangular magnets in the edges of the dorsal and ventral sections to hold those together. More surface area for those magnets to grab onto. Third, due to some design oversights on my side, the ventral midsection doesn't quite connect to the ventral aft section. You can see where the aluminum substructure is visible. Fourth, the wing pegs are printed parts of the wings. I probably should have just put holes in either side and used a plastic or wooden peg to friction lock the 2 parts together. There was definitely room for improvement. I'm a computer scientist, so when it came to mechanical design under time pressure, I really was just metaphorically hitting every mechanical problem with a rock until it gave way, using the simplest, dumbest solution I could think of. I really wish I had started with a smaller ship that I could learn on. And I actually mentioned that to Yakadami when I showed him the completed model, and he told me he was working on the Pinto, a RimWorld's Republic Corvette that's 298 meters long, or just over a meter in this scale. About 11 months later, he finished the sculpt, so the Pinto is going to be my next project. This time, I can take my time on it and really work on smart ways to build, both to look good and transport well. So hit the subscribe button if you want to come along for the adventure of creating another map-scale warship. Well, thanks for sticking with me for this review of my last build. I'm John Brewer. Come and learn from my mistakes.